Hello, this is Vanamali. The subject today is the Buddha. The title might be a bit shocking. The Buddha murdered, lynched, burnt at the stake. Now we know that that did not happen. So the question is why? Why didn't that happen? Um, what I speculate, what if the Buddha had been born in Christian or Muslim lands? Um, we know what happened to Giordano Bruno, and he was not alone. There were so many others, um, unbelievers, who were hunted down, actually, uh, dragged out of their homes and killed right in front of their families, burnt at the stake or lynched. There was so much violence against those who did not believe back in the day. And then they set upon each other, mass killings between Catholics and Protestants. In fact, America was settled by people fleeing religious persecution from their own religious people, a different sect. And we know in Islam the division between Shias and Sunnis, um, mass killings between those two sects, each claiming that their own religion or sect is correct, the other is wrong. And Hinduism is famous for caste, but there are lower castes in Islam deemed not Islam, the Muslims, and so discriminated and hated. But because it's an Abrahamic religion, it's not very popularized. The hate, the discrimination that exists. Um, Even today in Islamic countries, some Islamic countries like Pakistan, if you went around and tried to promote Buddhism and say there is no God, you would run afoul of blasphemy laws and you would find yourself lynched. So, but that did not happen in Hindu India. The Buddha and his Buddhists went around Hindu India saying there was no God and nothing happened to them. Why? And in fact, Hindus made Buddha a god. But we need to understand that this is not a God who does magic or miracle. These are human gods, gods who aspire to be. When we say God, we think of a person who is at a higher level and who does great things, who leads humanity forward, enlightens us. And that's what Hindus said the Buddha was. Yeah, no magic, no miracle, but does great things. That was also God Rama. Rama also never said he was a god, never did any magic or miracle. You can read the Ramayana, and there's no mention of God Rama doing any magic or miracle. Um, but who did what the gods could not do. And that's what Hinduism is saying Buddha was. Um, and he came to enlighten us and lead us to a better life. That's all the Buddha was all about. And that is why there is no hate in Hinduism, because Hindus are saying that God is our father. We are children of God. God is our teacher. We are students of God. Our mother is our first teacher. Our parents were our first teachers. And in life, we don't have just one teacher, we have many. Hence, the many gods in Hinduism, the many prophets in Judaism, the many gurus in Sikhism. All these are teacher student faiths. And of course, Buddha was also a teacher, we know that. But where Buddhism fails is having only one teacher. There should be many, not just one. But it is also a teacher-student faith. What does that mean? It means the goal for any child, for any student of God. What is that? It is to make our parents proud. It is to make our teachers proud of us. And how do we do that? We do that with our works, with our actions here in this world. And that's why Hindus preach reincarnation and Buddhists preach rebirth. It is here that we overcome difficulties. We become gods, if you will. That is here by doing great things. And we see that's the opposite of what Christianity and Islam preach. First of all, Christianity says, well, good works won't get you into heaven. You cannot earn heaven. Basically, mocking works. Good works or God's work will not get you into God's abode. Imagine that. But it says clearly that they don't view God as a father, a parent, or a teacher. Even though Christians call God a father, the first few commandments shows clearly that God is not a father. Fathers don't demand blind belief, obedience, loyalty, submission. Submission, Islam means submission. What father asks for submission to him and him alone? And if such demands are not met, singing his praises. We don't sing our father's praises. We don't sing the teacher's praises. Uh, that's a king. That's a dictator. What father will torture his children if such demands are not met? Again, that's a king. A dictator will torture his slave servants if they don't support him blindly. What son, upon meeting his father, gets down on his knees, begs for mercy, shaking with fear? Again, that's a slave. That's a slave servant. So they have lowered God down to a king, a dictator. They have lowered themselves to slave servants. Their goal is different. The goal is heaven, pleasures of the flesh, easy, lazy living at God's expense, doing nothing. You ask, what do you do in heaven? And you get a blank look. Can you describe a day, one day in heaven with details? And it's the details that trip them up. Because when fantasies, all Ponzi schemes, all lies, they all fall apart when pressed for details. It's the same thing here. But that is their goal. Their goal is heaven, easy, lazy living. And how do we get it? They say we must believe, obey, support the king, dictator. Well, that is true because that's what kings demanded. That's what dictators demand. They don't care about ethics, morals. They don't care about the works. Whether the subject slave is good or bad, that doesn't matter to them. All that matters to them is their loyalty, blind submission. Because kings, dictators, as you say, uneasy lies the crown. Um, if in today's world, if a politician or a prime minister or a president loses the election, he goes, well, okay, I'll maybe retire, do something else, or maybe try again 4 or 5 years later when elections come up again. Um, but that's not the fate of a king or a dictator. If a king loses power, basically another king wages war and defeats the king. Kings don't get to retire. They don't get to go away. The new king will make sure that the old king is dead. And not just the king, but his entire family, children must all be killed. Same thing with dictators. They must all be killed. I mean, the new dictator will make sure the old dictator is dead. And his children are also, and their supporters are also killed. They must not survive. Queen Catherine the Great of Russia, she had her own husband killed because he was a threat to her, to her power. And so think of it. It's not just the king that is killed, but his supporters must also be killed. And that's what happens to unbelievers. Unbelievers are not the supporters of this king, and therefore they must die too. They must suffer. And so back in the day, these unbelievers were dragged out of their homes, lynched, murdered. And even today, you see the threats of these people. If you don't believe and support our God, you will burn in hell. Entire families, women, children, babies will burn in hell. It will be like, for unbelievers, it will be like a Nazi Germany in the afterworld. That's what happened to Jews, right? By being a Jew, it was a crime. And gas chambers was their fate. And these religions are saying being an unbeliever is a crime. You being a Hindu is a crime. You being an atheist is a crime. You being a Buddhist is a crime. And for that crime alone, you will get gas chambers. But that is understandable when we understand what these religions are all about. These are master slave religions. Ancient people living under kings, dictators, they envisioned a similar world. They didn't have much knowledge of the world, of the universe. They thought the earth was it. The stars were fixed points in the sky. They didn't know anything about the universe. And they thought the afterworld would be similar. A king, dictator like God, Putin like God, would be demanding blind obedience, submission to him alone, sing only his praises, and rewarding, punishing accordingly, because that's the life they had. What is shocking and frightening, actually, is to realize that today's bright, educated, intelligent people are blindly following their primitive ideas of heaven. Crazy. All those thousands and thousands of young men and women studying religions. They're not studying religions. They're reading books. They're blind book readers and nodding. That's all. And that would have been the fate of the Buddha if he had been born in Christian or Muslim lands. And if you are viewing this video, you have to ask, how come I have never heard of this? Well, because the media, the Western media especially, that dominates the world, make sure that you do not hear of such views. They will actively censor these views. Censorship in this so-called free world that we live in today. Imagine that. But that's the world that we live in today, believe it or not. But what concerns you is whether you have to make a choice. Are you a child student of God, or are you a slave servant? If you are a slave servant, the promise is heaven, pleasures of the flesh. Whereas as a child student of God, the goals are different. You are not promised a life of pleasure. In fact, you are promised the opposite here, right? The life that we have here is not easy. There is pain, there is suffering. You have to work, you have to earn God's praise. God will not praise you, God will not be proud of you just because you believe and support him. That's a king, that's a dictator. As a father, as a teacher, he has higher standards. And are you man enough? Are you man enough to, or woman enough, I guess, to meet them? And those who think, oh, it sounds being a slave servant is better, I'll be rewarded with pleasures of the flesh. Well, I don't see any masters keeping their slave servants in comfort. Do you? We see masters who work their slaves to death, who whip them, in fact, if they make mistakes. Where do we see masters keeping their slave servants in comfort? We do see dictators keeping their sycophants, their cronies. In India, we call them chamchas, prostitutes, gigolos in comfort, right? Uh, we see rich guys, we see movie stars surrounded by these chamchas, by these sycophants, singing his praises, laughing at his jokes, doing his bidding, and expecting to be kept in comfort by him. You know, he takes them to expensive restaurants. The drinks are in him. The bill is on him. They get their good life. But do they get his respect? No, no. He views them with contempt and disgust. For he is not a fool. These rich guys are not fools. They know why these people are singing their praises. They know what all their praises are for. It's for their wallet. It's for their money. It's not for him. The day he cuts off all this money to them, giving them money, taking them to expensive restaurants, feeding them, paying for their drinks, boom, they're gone. They look for some other rich guy, some other sugar daddy. He knows that. And so he views them with contempt and disgust. And God too views such people with contempt and disgust, for whom God is just a ticket to the good life, ticket to heaven, my ticket to heaven. If I sing his praises, if I blindly believe and support him, oh, he will reward me. It's all about the reward. They talk about how heaven is so wonderful, so great, and all their focus is on heaven, getting to heaven, enjoying the good life. It's not about God. And I'm sorry, God is not a sugar daddy. God is not keeping billions of people in cozy comfort while they just shamelessly sponge off him. They have lowered themselves to sycophants, chamchas, cronies. But God is not lowering himself to be a sugar daddy. I'm sorry, those who think of or dream of getting away to heaven will be disappointed. Thank you.